Guys, I need to tell you a secret. Come in, lean close, don't be shy. You ready? It's kind of a doozy. Here it goes. I've never played either of the original Paper Mario games. I know. It's kind of Nintendo geek sacrilege to have not played those games. But my first Nintendo console was the Wii, which I received as a gift when I was still young. By the time I had the inclination to play them, my only console was the Switch. I mean, the very first one is available with the NSO expansion pack, which, yes, I do have. But I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I definitely will play it before too long. In fact, you're probably watching a little bit of the original Paper Mario gameplay footage right now, since I start writing scripts before even getting gameplay footage. But for the sake of this video, I haven't really played them. However, I have played another Paper Mario game. It's the least controversial game in the series, Sticker Star. I played it for about a half hour 10 years ago and haven't touched it since. I just wasn't into it. I later learned that I played about 30 minutes more than anyone should play that game, so I haven't picked it up again. Really, the Origami King is the first in the series that I've played. I want to highlight this, because it should show that I have no point of comparison between the Origami King and, say, the Thousand Year Door. Among fans of the Paper Mario series, there are a lot of heated opinions on whether or not one of these games is objectively superior to the other. I couldn't possibly say. I also know that my opinion on the Origami King hasn't been influenced by any of the other games in the series. My simultaneous enjoyment and disappointment with this game exist entirely because of what this game does and doesn't do, not because of how it aligns with or betrays the legacy it inherits, intentionally or not. That said, this video is a comparison. See, there is a game that exists as an almost perfect parallel to the Origami King that isn't a Paper Mario game. It has the same tropes, the same storytelling style, and even takes inspiration from those older RPGs in the way the Origami King did. We're going to talk about all of that and much more. So, hi, my name is Volcaronite, and today we're taking a look at Paper Mario, the Spiritless Successor. I want to start with all of the most obvious thoughts on the game, and those are all pretty glowing. First and foremost, this game is drop-dead gorgeous. I mean, just look at the game. Look at it, it's beautiful. I love literally every single area. The opening grassland is so tranquil, the way Toad Town is constructed feels so natural, as does the crater where Peach's castle was ripped out of the ground. Autumn Mountain is my favorite area in the game, and one of my favorites in any RPG. It's just so pretty, colorful, alive, varied. The water looks so good, as does the temple nestled between the cliffs. Shogun Studios is wonderfully realized, and the nighttime Sniffet City is even better than Toad Town. I could go on gushing about the visuals of the game, but I don't need to. I think that the papercraft style of the art allows for a very colorful, polished, unique enjoyment experience. It feels like the world is just this way. I really love when a story commits to its world-building strokes. It's how I write my own fiction, and the Origami King does this almost immaculately. This world is paper in the same way that ours is made up of the particles of the universe. Oh, what's that? That big ol' asterisk on the screen right now indicating that there must be some caveat to the last statement I made? Don't worry about it, I'm sure it won't come up again later on in the video. No siree. Similarly, the story is really cool. We play as Mario Olivia, our little plumber extraordinaire with a magical floating companion. This is a very common trope in Mario games. Mario isn't too fond of speaking, so he's usually joined by some sort of sprightly sidekick. Voluma in Mario Galaxy, Cappy in Odyssey, Beepo in Mario + Rabbids, Bowser Jr. in Bowser's Fury, you get the picture. We find and rescue Olivia, a floating origami girl, after being cast into a dungeon by an also origami and disturbingly robotic Princess Peach. We see this surprisingly dark scene where Mushroom Kingdom denizens are tortured and folded, rescue Bowser, and meet the primary antagonist of the game, King Ollie. This scene on the castle balcony actually gives us a whole ton of exposition about the world, the game, and the story. We learn that Ollie, the obvious villain, is trying to take over the world by kidnapping Peach and usurping her kingdom. This by itself is the standard Mario game affair. What makes this game's story unique is that the villain's plan between kidnap Peach and rule the world actually exists. It's quite sinister and macabre for a Mario game too. Ollie has the power to take the regular flat paper creatures of the Mushroom Kingdom and fold them into origami versions of themselves. This has the effect of brainwashing them to blindly serve their king. Because Ollie has total control over his folded creations, and because folding creatures into origami is typically irreversible, this means that Ollie has unchecked power over this kingdom. After learning all this, being introduced to the unique combat mechanics of the game, and learning that the only way to stop the folded soldiers is to beat them, shredding them into confetti and killing the original creature, Ollie summons magical streamers that lift the castle out of the ground, Mario Galaxy style, and relocates it to the top of a volcano. Mario, Olivia, and Bowser are saved in the nick of time, but their getaway vehicle is hit by a streamer, so Mario lands face down in a meadow far away. And thus, the plot of the game is laid out. Seek out the sources of the streamers, destroy them, and go to the castle to confront Ollie. Let me go ahead and say this. If you give some thought to the story, you'll realize that it's pretty dark for a Mario game, or even a Nintendo game. Even in those Nintendo games designed for more mature audiences, like Metroid or Zelda, their stories are usually very straightforward, with a clear distinction between good and evil. There's no moral ambiguity in, say, Bayonetta. Your protagonist, the human-looking creature right here, is playing through a world of monsters and evil. Beat them all up, beat up the bosses, restore the world to harmony. That's just the way these games go. Bayonetta might be the most mature property Nintendo owns, but she still only occupies stories with very black and white morality. The Origami King is a little different. Sure, Mario is the good guy, King Ollie is the bad guy, and the end goal of the game is to have Mario destroy Ollie, saving the world. But it's made clear from the very beginning that just about every enemy in your way is a real, living character that was simply brainwashed by Ollie, and that you cannot save them. You must kill them to move on. To be clear, this is not an interpretation. All of this is stated explicitly in that scene on the balcony of the castle. Look, all of this is positive. As somebody whose entire experience with the series before this game was Sticker Star, I was comfortably expecting nothing so nuanced in the story department when I first booted up the game. But as I played, I took the time to think about all of the cultural attention surrounding the way this game was made, how fans loved the first two games in the Paper Mario series, tried their best not to argue about the third, and mostly disliked the fourth and fifth. Everything had been compromised in Sticker Star, and what had been left was the empty vessel of what was once a great game. Color Splash brought back a little bit of character, but still was lacking most of what gave these games their soul. Soulless is not an apt description of the Origami King. It has so much character and love in its design. This is true of the story, but that care is woven throughout the game. The world design also has the same level of care. Thought was given into where every person lives. There are towns, cities, and settlements across the world. Each of the areas was crafted in a very natural way that makes them feel more like real places than Mario games usually get the opportunity to. The world is no Witcher 3 continent. It's not an open world in the same way, of course. The game is much smaller in scope. But for the kind of world the Origami King tries to build, it's quite successful. This isn't just a product of the world from a design aspect. The world is split up into several regions, and each one goes through major changes as the story progresses. Take the Great Sea. It's the fourth major region in the game, where you go to destroy the purple streamer. You basically see three different versions of this area. The first time you visit, you're very restricted. You go to the sea while in pursuit of the third streamer as part of the main story. You're quite limited, since there's a lot of unnavigable fog and you're hunting for a deserted cruise ship. There's a great segment of exploration on the ship, you collect what you came for, and you leave. Hours pass. You visited the Great Sea very early into your third streamer mission, and you spend a long time in the desert. Finally, at the very end, you meet a character that can help you navigate the fog of the Great Sea. So you return for the second version. The sea is open, but the fog persists, so you're forced to navigate it. You can't access many more areas, but you are led to a specific island that holds the key to dispelling the fog. Thus, you get the third and final version. A fun, open region where you unlock areas, treasures, and story items in an on-the-nose but nevertheless enjoyable, hope you like Wind Waker island-hopping adventure. And yes, I do like Wind Waker, thank you very much, so even when I had to get the 3 magical orbs through the temple trials of power, courage, and wisdom, I continued to enjoy the region. It felt kind of real. It was all relatively contrived. The region was far more concerned with referencing Zelda than being a realistic ocean, but for what it was a real treat to explore. And I could go on praising this game. The characters are always at least funny, and sometimes can even be great. If you don't like the darker undertones of the story, then they're easy to ignore. You get a lighthearted adventure with Mario Olivia instead. I can't say enough about the art design. There's a ton of gameplay variety in minigames, the combat system gets points for individuality at least. Make no mistake, the Origami King is a good game. If that's all you wanted to hear, then you're good to go. But while making my way through this rendition of the Mushroom Kingdom, and even 100% completing the game, outside of the no game over requirement thanks to Lab Bowser Jr., something kept nagging at me. As I played through this light RPG with a very distinctive art style, a lot of online cultural attention, an awesome soundtrack, writing that's heavily focused on comedy with darker, almost disturbing underlying themes, one that is very reminiscent of an older beloved RPG and is designed as a sort of spiritual successor to that game, one that has a passing at best relationship with the fourth wall and a combat system that mixes real-time turn-based and puzzle solving, I kept being hit with these pangs of disappointment, familiarity, deja vu. It's hard to say. What's not hard to say is why I kept being hit with these feelings. I felt these things because I had relatively recently played through another RPG with all of these qualities, but was much more successful in becoming a fan favorite and a revival of the RPG style which it emulated. Of course, I'm talking about Undertale. No, that wasn't a typo, and this isn't a joke. After taking the time to analyze what I did and didn't like about the Origami King, I began to realize that the intentions of the game, the way its story, combat, and development came into being, had a lot in common with Undertale. Of course, the games are very different, but there are some key similarities that allow for a really compelling comparison, as well as an apt analysis on exactly how the Origami King succeeds and suffers as a game. Alright, enough build-up. It's time for Paper Mario the Origami King versus Undertale. Let's go. I should begin by stating that I really love Undertale. I know, big shocker, but it's really important for me to say that, in a lot of ways, Undertale is exactly what I love in games. I'm a writer, a storyteller at heart. What I love most about games is the way that they can integrate gameplay, agency, and interactivity into stories to tell them in a way unique to the medium. In fact, the single best thing about Undertale, in my opinion, is that it tells a story for gamers in a way that's unique to games and in a way that would be impossible if it weren't a game. But even that description is inadequate, because Undertale doesn't tell a story in a unique way. It tells three. Enormous spoilers for Undertale follow. If you don't know the deal with Undertale, there's literally no person who won't get at least some enjoyment out of the game. And if you're already familiar with Undertale and don't need a story refresher, then you can skip this story recap and jump to this timestamp to continue with the video. Good, so here we go. A quick explanation of the deal with Undertale for the uninitiated. You start the game by falling into a cavern deep below a mountain, imagining it as a regular RPG. But almost immediately, things get strange. After almost being murdered, you're guided through several puzzles by an overprotective mother who also tells you the value of not killing. As this is a traditional RPG, you get random encounters with monsters regularly. There is, indeed, an option to talk to them, right next to the option to fight. For the rest of the tutorial, you try not to fight and see that monsters can pretty easily be defeated by simple text puzzles. You're determined not to fight. But then, after giving several warnings and attempting to end your journey, that overprotective mother turns on you. She won't talk to you. You can't leave, you can't move. Her attacks are powerful, more powerful than anything you've yet seen. You try to avoid fighting her, but you can't. So, you kill her. You're mocked for your choice, but you continue on your journey. It's hilariously written and very heartful. Monsters stand in your way. You try to save them all, but are occasionally irritated into killing some. You do your best, make it through the wonderful world and to the last boss. The last boss has no option to talk, no option to spare him at all. In a foreshadowing meta moment, he destroys the option on your menu. So, you defeat him, but he's different. He doesn't die, and even offers you peace. After accepting his offer, you watch him get murdered by the true final boss, the same creature that tried to kill you at the beginning. You defeat him, too, and after sparing him, he muses that it may be possible to play the game without killing anyone at all. You're doubtful, but you try. You kill nothing. You calmly befriend every monster you encounter. The mother, who you killed last time, can be spared. You just have to be determined to do so. You make it through the irritating encounters with Jerry and befriend the bosses you killed last time. And you get a very heartwarming story about the monster world's struggles. How they don't want to fight you or defeat you. They just want to go home to the world on the surface. how attempts to break the spell that traps them down here have failed in spectacular fashion. You get the opportunity to save everyone, even that snarky boss from the very beginning, and you get the happy ending. But you're not done. You've done everything right, played by the rules, and gotten the ending you were supposed to get. But what happens if you break all the rules? What happens if, instead of sparing and befriending, you murder everyone? So, you do. It's much darker this time. The entire world shifts as if to highlight your evil. Puzzles are already solved, homes are empty, the music is off. You kill every creature in your path. You keep going until you start to get random encounters with no one. You've killed everyone. You murder the mother, the jovial skeleton who tries to keep your grin on, the guardian of the underworld, the spider queen, the robot pop star sensation. Through it all, the world seems to constantly remind you that you're playing a game, that you're not doing this for any reason. And then you get to the corridor of judgment. The game drops all pretenses of a story and talks to the player. That final boss chastises you for everything, for burning the monster world to the ground simply to see what will happen. You're doing this because you can, and because you can, you have to. The battle is grueling and boring as the final boss attempts to keep you from destroying the world entirely, hoping to frustrate and bore you into giving up and abandoning the world, leaving what few monsters remain some pieces to pick up. He beats, berates, and begs you into just letting go and leaving the world alone, never to return. You do not. You killed that final boss. And you destroyed the last few monsters until you, yourself, are destroyed along with the rest of the world. You got what you wanted. You saw what happened when you chose wrong. The game is a meta-commentary on the morality of games and players. There's this wonderful fantasy story being told, but if you try to break it, the game allows you to in order to deliver a different message. If you want to read the story and play the hero, Undertale will let you. It'll encourage you, even give you the best ending. But if you want to play the villain, Undertale will let you do that too, just to show you what happens. It leaves you unsatisfied and angry, and the decision is irreversible. Okay, that's it. There's so much more to be said about Undertale because it's just truly magnificent. There's also some criticism to be laid on it, like for example how the evil villain run rewards players with by far the best music and gameplay of the entire game. But never mind that. I want you to have the main conceit of Undertale fresh on your mind for this video because of how similar the game is to the Origami King. Because, well, the two games have a lot in common. So much so that we can analyze the way that the Origami King succeeds and fails by aligning those attempts with the same ones that Undertale made. To begin, we're going to look at perhaps the most obvious thing that these games have in common, their stories. These are two games that are light RPGs focused on storytelling that combines a hero following in the footsteps of many who went before them, a world that's being transformed throughout the game's stories to stop them, and a wealth of comic writing on top of a somewhat tragic story if you choose to look deep enough. Both games are, at least partially, intentionally mocking the tropes of the traditional RPG genre, with silent protagonists fighting disgruntled NPCs in battles that are as much a formality as they are a necessity. Truly, these games draw from the same sources and work in the same direction. Let's take some time to break down this phenomenon in each game and understand how they took similar paths from similar sources but ended up with the two wildly distinct games that they did. Fabulous. So first, the Origami King. I went through a brief overview of the story in the first chapter, so I won't regale you with that again. But one of the strongest through lines of the story is the idea that the Origami King is just another Mario story. You play as Mario, talkative as ever, as he works to save Princess Peach. He journeys through the typical worlds, grasslands, water, desert, sky. He ends up at Peach's castle where the final showdown takes place. But the game's storytelling voice is ever so aware of the tropes of the Mario games. It knows that whoever is playing the game, well, they probably know how the story goes. They know what Mario is here to do. And so, instead of taking the Super Mario Odyssey approach of hand-waving away all the tropey stuff, starting in medias res, and glossing over the routine of it all, the Origami King plays with the player's supposed knowledge of the tropes. Peach is captured, even in her castle, sure, but Peach isn't simply kidnapped. She's brainwashed into helping the villain with his plans. And that villain? It's not Bowser. No, Bowser is actually yet another victim of the antagonist. He gets dropped into a dungeon and, tortured, same as Mario was to be. The two actually team up, acknowledging their shared history from time to time. Bowser's minions do the same thing, even sometimes interacting with their folded brethren. There's an air about the story of bucking the trends. There's locations that are featured in other Mario games, but also some brand new ones, created by the hands of the antagonists. In fact, all of this change and difference is the result of a sect of villains that can manipulate the world. The staplers, scissors, colored pencils, the tools that one might use in order to craft with paper. paper the fundamental building block of this world. That era of bucking trends is sometimes subtextual, but sometimes written right into the story of the game. You can make a pretty good observation that those things which are too different from the typical Mario tropes are the waypoints for the story to place antagonists at. A city in perpetual nighttime desert that's home to an obscure Mario enemy, all of whom just move into the city one day and don't have the faintest idea why. The watchtower atop a mountain, artificially raised several hundred feet above the ground. Even the showdown with generic anime villain Scissors, who crashed Bowser's airship into a spa in the sky. These are unusual, out of what's expected. This is the game's story. The characters expect a certain routine to the world. Even its crimes are routine. Bowser kidnaps Peach, Mario gives chase. He stomps Goombas and Koopas, navigating Bowser's minions. He makes it to Bowser's castle, beats the turtle up, gets a smooch or a slice of cake or something. That's just the way the story works. It's dull, it's predictable, it's maybe a little problematic, but it's the way of the world. But in the Origami King, the enemies are not the routine enemies which everyone is so prepared for. It's those who wish to alter the world so dramatically that the routine would be permanently destroyed. The villains are those that want to ruin the world, unique from the typical antagonists. So with that distillation, let's turn to Undertale to understand how it tells its own story. As we discussed, Undertale actually has 3 distinct stories, each with a different set of antagonists. The primary run is very much the typical RPG affair. You make your way through the most linear world, befriending a few monsters but killing the majority, fighting a handful of boss monsters on your way. You navigate puzzles and traps and weird robot cooking game shows on your way to the exit. By the end, you face a stereotypical leader of the world who, plot twist, isn't actually the bad guy. After defeating him and expressing your desire to stay, we see the main antagonist, Flowey, the true villain, doesn't want a simple defense of the underworld or to control it. His goals are actually in line with the players. He wants to escape the world permanently. His motives are perhaps darker than the players, but that's how he feels. Of course, you prevail and escape, and you get the typical RPG ending. But then you're hit with a new piece of information. What if you bucked the RPG trend and didn't kill a soul? See, unlike the Origami King, Undertale probably doesn't have the luxury of assuming that its players have played any specific games. It does assume that players have a general, basic understanding of the mechanics and general gameplay of RPGs, but beyond that, it needs to make the rules clear. This first run through the game, called a neutral run, is the trend the rest of Undertale will buck. It sets it up so that the player is intimately familiar with its own world before moving on. And then, Undertale bucks its own trend. It does it twice, depending on the choices of the player. In the good route, called the pacifist route, the player teams up with the monsters. Even those that portray themselves as enemies or opponents to the player are treated as allies and friends. See, the antagonist to this route is not the typical RPG antagonist. Flowey, who's actually revealed to be a character named Asriel, wants to destroy the world. He actually makes good on this threat by capturing most of the residents of the world and making it unrecognizable. In the end, by defeating him, the player stops the changes from going any further. Instead of murdering the entirety of the world, as Asriel wanted, the player opens the door that links the underground world to the rest of the world above it. This change is huge, but not nearly as transformative as the change that Asriel wanted to make. And then, finally, Undertale allows the player to ally with Flowey from the start. Flowey wasn't really powerful enough to achieve his goals on his own. He needed help. The player offers that help, truly committing genocide of the underground. Indeed, this route is known as the genocide route through the game for this reason. The antagonist of this game is, ironically, you. You aid in the destruction of the world. All the puzzles and traps that the monsters laid for the people that came before and would come again are rendered meaningless. You are the agent of irreparable change in this world, and the antagonists to you are actually the heroes of the story. You win, beating them and ending the world as is your wont. You buck the trend, destroying the world permanently. Undertale has the same story conceit as the Origami King. The antagonist is not a usual enemy of the world. No, the worlds of both of these games are easily prepared for the typical foe to face, and the worlds are very literally designed to suit this fact. But this time, the antagonists are not keen to follow in the footsteps of their predecessors. They want to break the world, reshaping it in their own image for the express purpose of ending the routine story of the world and making it their own. The player solves this problem by, ironically, following in the footsteps of their predecessors, whether they are previous Marios or just other RPG protagonists, in order to get to the finish and stop the enemy. All of this is shared by the two games. However, Undertale takes this idea much further than the Origami King does, resulting in an exploration of the idea that feels more complete and genuine. The Origami King sees the world broken by a single antagonist with a single goal, and the player must follow a single path to reach a single conclusion. The story toys with the idea of bucking the trend, but ends up being a moderate permutation of just that. It feels less like a parody and more like another retelling. Undertale is prepared for the player to take several different paths and adjust to suit them. The idea of bucking the trend is not a monolith. There's many ways a story could choose to do this. Undertale wants the player to push those boundaries and figure out how the characters of the story want their story to end. By acting as a preservationist, an agent of change, or somewhere in between, the player ends up on different ends of the scale from good to bad. That means that in both games, break from routine is a bad thing. It's an interesting approach to the storytelling aspect of these games. It's one that relies on other pieces of media to create a foundation for the new incarnations to break. I think that Undertale is prepared to do a better job at this, and it's this excellent execution of the idea that makes the Origami King feel more hollow. The Origami King has been one-upped at every step of the way by a game that's already done what it was trying to do with the story, but better. Precisely why this happened, that is, why the structure of the Origami King was created so similarly to that of Undertale, is beyond the scope of even this very long video. It does provide a great way to compare these stories, but it's just bizarre. But perhaps more bizarre than all of this similarity in the stories of these games is the relationship that these games share with the real world. In other words, these games are a part of it. One could call this a low fantasy setting, and that's fair. Perhaps for Undertale this may be true, but there's a better way to understand this relationship because it's not as serious as the term low fantasy implies. No, describing this phenomenon is easier than all that. It's knowledge of the fourth wall. Both of these games are, canonically, a part of a larger world that is inhabited by the creators of the stories of each game, and characters in both games know this. Lots of games recently have been playing with the fourth wall, and, indeed, it's a trick that many mediums try to use. Let's take a look at how these games use the same trope in different ways for different results. And oh, what's this? Hey look, it's the return of that asterisk from the beginning of the video. You remember, right? She showed up while I was recapping the Origami King, during a totally not foreshadowing moment when I talked about how this game feels like it's a fantasy world and that the paper is just an art style. Well, oops, that's not quite right. See, the Origami King is, canonically, a world that has been crafted inside a larger world. There's ample evidence of this throughout the game. The world is constructed from colored paper supported by a wire frame. This can be seen whenever you encounter a hole in the world or break through a paper macho monster. All of this is canon and known by the characters of the world. Many acknowledge the manipulation of their bodies, being crumpled, torn, or colored over. The art of origami is something akin to brainwashing, affecting the mind and subjecting the victim to the will of the folder. Additionally, the greatest enemies are the tools that the creators, maybe humans, can use to manipulate paper. The scissors, the stapler, colored pencils, hole punch, these are dangerous antagonists, and their destruction of toads is very evident. Finally, the game includes some magical creatures that are capable of summoning some elements in their natural form. That is, they can create water, fire, earth, and ice that isn't just made from paper. This suggests that the characters with stronger magic actually do create the raw elements first, and the creators of the world replace them with paper as fast as they can. This can be seen happening throughout several of elemental battles, and whenever Olivia uses those powers in the story. It's always noticeable for being quite visually jarring, but it just contributes to the idea that everything is being crafted by some creators as the story goes on. Again, this is all knowledge that the characters of the game know and interact with. It's public information that the story uses as a tool to convey ideas that might not otherwise be possible. Or, well, it could have used the information in this way, but it really doesn't. Though reminders of this world's status as canonically fiction come up often and obviously, they're rarely used as anything other than throwaway jokes and one-liners. Much of it comes off as a very hand-wavy way to add the jokes and story to the art style in a way that makes everything seem inevitable, but also in as ham-fisted a way as possible, making it seem almost patronizing. I cannot recall a single conversation between named characters that does not, at some point, refer to the world or the characters as being crafts made of paper. Whether it's origami folding, or confetti being used to literally paper over the holes in the world, or bodies creasing, or any of the hundreds of other ways that this was joked about throughout the story. It was genuinely exhausting. To be fair, there's also a handful of lines about the serial and repetitive nature of Mario games and stories, discussing how predictable the plots are and acknowledging the fact that just about everything has happened before. But again, these are throwaway jokes and one-liners designed for laughs, not story. The fourth wall is being broken for no reason. Now at this point, I'd like to say that breaking the fourth wall for the hell of it is not itself a virtue. Many great works of fiction, most great works of fiction, do not recognize their own fictional identity. Breaking the fourth wall is a trick that needs to be used carefully and intentionally, or else it will fall flat and make the entire experience feel less authentic. There's ways that different mediums can do this. Novels have the capacity of breaking the fourth wall by being fictional recreations, like in The Princess Bride, or by being explicit journal entries compiled by someone who is supposedly in the real world, like in House of Leaves. Film and television can use a mockumentary format, like in The Office, or can treat anyone who can recognize the fourth wall as simply incorrect, like in Community. Or, in games, they can use the fourth wall as a method to speak directly to the player, presenting messages and ideas which couldn't otherwise be conveyed properly. This brings us to Undertale, and using the fourth wall right. Undertale has a couple of world-within-a-world layers to break through, should the player choose to interact with them. The primary story involves a monster world that has been sealed underground, separated from the wide world of the humans, implied to be a fictional Earth. This is the only dichotomy that the majority of characters in the game seem to be aware of. However, there's a handful of powerful characters that do seem to be aware of some of the mechanics of the game. Bosses manipulate players' movements and lock them into the combat screen intentionally. Some small monsters seem to have a passing awareness of this too. There's a handful of monsters that have total awareness of not only the game, but of the player outside of it. One of these characters is Flowey/Asriel, the antagonist for most games. They are capable of manipulating and destroying save files and forcing the player to remain in the boss fight eternally. But even Asriel doesn't seem to understand or care about the implications of the outside world, and how a player can enter theirs at any time to bend it to their will. No, that duty is left to Sans. Sans, the friendly jokester that you meet at the beginning and encounter many times on your journey to the end. The begrudging guardian of the underworld, Sans doesn't really care about the world or humans. He's just interested in relaxing and having a good time. Well, usually. But if the player allies with Flowey from the beginning, Sans changes. He's easily the most powerful magical entity in the underworld due to his complete understanding of the game, the player, and the implications. He delivers pointed accusations that claim the player is totally amoral, only interacting with the game to see what happens. Consequences to the world be damned. He's not obsessed with escape or in disbelief. He sees the two worlds as separate and co-equal, and wants to protect his own. He puts you into that grueling and boring boss fight at the end to try and convince the player that continuing to destroy the world isn't worth the trouble. Undertale uses the fourth wall to comment on the player's action, on your actions. You are making choices that save or murder the peaceful citizens of the world, and the game wants you to remember that there are consequences to this. The player acts evil for no particular reason, even working against their own sense of fun and enjoyability in order to satiate some curiosity. And the end result isn't worth it. The game knows this and tells the player, but the player just doesn't care. I mentioned in the Undertale story synopsis from earlier that the game's plot was a meta-commentary on the morality of games. This is it. This is the commentary. There's no way to really do this effectively without keeping up the charade of the fourth wall to let the player choose without disruption, then to pull the curtain down and demonstrate the results. It's this inventive utilization of the fourth wall as a plot device that so enriched Undertale and left the Origami King feeling so vapid. Both of these games are made with the approach of using the fourth wall as a plot device. One of them uses it as an intentional curtain, hiding the inner workings of the game until it's ready for the player to interact with them, cleverly delivering results and hitting the player with their own choices. The other uses it as a backboard for easy jokes and a crutch for a plot that didn't even need it. Now, with this, we have the sum of why the stories of these games make me feel the way that they did. However, there's another side to this comparison. There's an even better way of comparing the successes of Undertale with the failures of the Origami King, and demonstrating the hollow and empty experience that lurks beneath the colorful surface of the game. It's the mechanics, or, more specifically, I mentioned at the beginning of the video that when I played the Origami King for the very first time, it was almost immediately after playing Undertale for the very first time. The two were played for me almost back to back, so I was able to directly compare their gameplay systems. Of course, as I alluded to earlier, these games' combat systems can be described in the same way from a high level. They look turn-based, but incorporate puzzle solving and real-time action into their combat to allow for some dynamic interest. Let's take a look at how these two games incorporate these systems in practice. We'll start with the Origami King. While navigating the overworld, you'll see enemies wandering around. Some will charge you, others will leave you be. But if you collide with one, you'll be transported to this game's magical, surreal battle land. Here, Mario is at the center of a puzzle circle. The enemy that Mario ran into on the surface was a representation of a group of enemies, which appear fully now, scattered across the puzzle circle. Mario is able to manipulate the puzzle circle by either rotating a single ring or shifting a row. Mario has a limited number of these manipulations each turn, and his goal is to align the enemies in order to attack them best. Ideally, he's attempting to move the enemies into either a straight row in order to jump on them, or into a box of 2x2 in the rings closest to him to smack them with a hammer. Mario always has the capacity to destroy all enemies in a single turn. Properly aligning the enemies can range in difficulty from laughable to infuriating, but doing so will grant an attack bonus so vast that, if combined with the proper attacks, Mario will defeat each enemy in a single strike. If the player is unable to defeat every enemy, either by failing to complete the puzzle or not dealing enough damage, then the enemies have a chance to attack. Their attacks are quite randomized, but Mario has the chance to block a portion of the damage by hitting the strike button as he's attacked. So the combat works like this. A puzzle-solving element is mandatory at the beginning, challenging the player with a sliding tile puzzle to align the enemies. If the puzzle is completed, then there's a brief selection and a quick-time event segment before defeating all enemies without risk. If the puzzle has failed, then the selection becomes more akin to turn-based combat, selecting the attacks that will do the most damage. Then, a series of quick-time event segments commence as the player tries to maximize Mario's damage output and minimize damage taken. At the end, the enemies move around and the player starts from the beginning. Now, I've got some thoughts and opinions on this system, everyone does, but before we dive too deep into those, let's take a look at Undertale for comparison. Undertale has combat interactions via the random encounter system, no overworld visible enemies. While walking through a region with random encounters, the player may be pulled into Undertale's magical surreal battle lane. This interface looks like a typical RPG, certainly more than the Origami King's does. You're presented with a blurb about the encounter, and have 4 options beneath you. Most of these are familiar to anyone who's played an RPG before. Fight is clear, and puts you into a quick time event timing section not unlike that of the Origami King. Item allows you to access your inventory to get healing items or buffs. Again, the Origami King has a similar feature. Mercy is oddly named, but has the option to flee. All of these are quite sensible and predictable. There's 2 options that are unusual then. The first is that other option under Mercy, Spare. We'll come back to this since it's crucial, but we're going to start with the 4th option on the main screen, Act. Instead of fighting, the player can interpret the dialogue the game presents as puzzle elements and try to solve each encounter through text prompts. This can be tricky, but every species of monster has a unique path to being solved. Some want to be alone, others want to be validated. Some just want you to play their chest like a pair of muscular bongos, not a joke. But once a puzzle has been completed, the Spare option under Mercy will glow yellow, or maybe pink, or not at all if you hate frogs, also not a joke. This indicates that you can spare the monster, allowing for a peaceful resolution to the encounter. If you choose to attack, then you get put into the aforementioned QuickTime event segment. Regardless of whether you act or attack, you'll be put into the monster's attack afterwards, which is a real-time bullet hell segment where you manipulate a heart in a 2D plane to avoid attacks, before starting over and looping to your turn again. So for these encounters, you enter a turn-based encounter and have the choice between puzzle solving and a QuickTime event real-time attack, before being forced to defend yourself in real-time action. Then everything starts over. I'm glossing over a lot of nuance in Undertale's systems here because, if I didn't, this video might be twice as long as it already is. But it's that point that will start us in our comparison, because despite the fact that these games have similar procedures, I find Undertale's combat to be rich and fascinating, while the Origami King's is lackluster and lifeless. This is because of the first notable deviation, variety. The Origami King sends you through dozens of combat encounters throughout the game, but they're all the same. Some enemies have special conditions, usually meaning they can't be hit by one of the types of weapons, but every encounter is the same. Manipulate the puzzle circle to get enemies in rows and boxes. You're going to be seeing this ring a lot. It even shows up in certain non-combat segments of the game, foregoing gameplay variety and development for familiarity. This ring goes from kind of clever to very tedious by the end of the game, because there's little development to the basic structure. If you could get weapons that behave differently, or if you were forced to take multiple turns to defeat enemies, thus requiring interactions with all aspects of the combat, then we might be having a different conversation. But no. Once you learn the basics, you've learned everything about the system. Meanwhile, Undertale excels in the variety department. Every species of enemy, and there are many, has a different attack pattern, dialogue, and text puzzle requirement. So, even though the encounters have the same style of gameplay, each one is so unique that they don't get stale on a typical playthrough. Undertale is also able to expand the variety of gameplay in these combat sections by combining 2 enemy encounters into one, which leads to some fun and funny battles like those against Jerry and Sunderplane. The Origami King toys with the idea of combining unique enemy traits together. You can see that mini battles with the disappearing boos also include other enemies, but they exist separately to each other, both in and out of battle. All this said, discussing the combat systems in these games by merely focusing on combat with regular enemies is almost missing the point. That's because most of the combat gameplay variety in both games comes from boss fights. Interestingly, Interestingly, both games modify combat in the same basic way for boss fights. They restrict the movement of the player character to position the boss as the more powerful entity between the two. Let's take a look at how this is done in practice, seeing if the patterns we saw in regular combat carry over to boss fights. Boss fights in the Origami King still use the puzzle circle, but instead of Mario standing in the center, the boss is in the center, and Mario is on the outside. Mario still manipulates the ring, but instead of segments containing enemies, they contain a series of arrows. Mario must align the arrows to move to the center, collecting any buffs and bonuses he can on the way, and end in the center of the circle to attack the boss. Bosses will always have some mechanic of disrupting the circle to restrict either the movement of the puzzle circle itself or Mario's movement in it. A tape dispenser will tape two rings together, meaning those two rings must be rotated together. A large phoenix will scatter fiery feathers onto certain segments, damaging Mario if he steps on any of them. So these two changes modify a specific aspect of combat, mobility. By modifying and restricting Mario's movement around the puzzle circle, boss combat is able to feel clever and inventive in these battles, more than they do in regular combat. In a very real way, the boss combat of the Origami King is the main reason why the combat in that game is not only tolerable, but even enjoyable in certain respects. There is no more variety in the combat system than there is in boss combat. Each boss does still contain the same elements, either trial and error your way into discovering each boss's distinctive weak points and exploit them like a puzzle, or just brute force your way through what may very well be a 30+ minute slog. There's no real in-between. With that, let's move on to Undertale, where we can see that boss combat is radically different to ordinary combat. Most bosses start out in the same way, with you having to select from your typical 4-option suite to damage the boss, talk to them, use items, or flee. You usually can't flee though, and offering mercy will typically earn you a snide remark before the boss attacks you. That means that you'll be limited to attacking, acting, or using an item before the boss's turn. However, before each boss attacks you, they will first interrupt and limit your movement. This is signified by the changing of your heart's color from red to something else. Each boss limits your movement differently. Papyrus, this jovial skeleton, gives your heart gravity physics, forcing you to jump over his attacks. Undyne, guardian of the dweeb's underworld, freezes your heart and gives you a shield with attacks coming from each orthogonal side, forcing you into a sort of Dance Dance Revolution style of defense. The Spider Queen traps you in a web and sets her monster pet on you, giving you a sort of Temple Run Guitar Hero hybrid where you have to dodge obstacles on a limited number of linear paths that you jump between. Almost all bosses limit your movement in some way, but each one does it very differently. This limit of movement is intended to highlight the fact that the player is meant to feel like the weaker entity in the battle. In most random monster battles, the player is free to move and act as they wish, with the battle's pace being placed almost entirely in the player's hands. But in boss battles, it's typically the boss that controls the speed. Lengthy and powerful attacks require intense care and focus to dodge and defend against, and your own simple attacks do very little damage. This, of course, is to help bring focus onto Undertale's system of appeasing all foes through mercy and talking rather than battling. It's a combat system that's specifically designed to disincentivize the actual combat in favor of puzzle solving. In boss battles, this is particularly powerful. The boss's attacks increase in power and difficulty as the battles progress for the most part, so fighting continues to challenge even as the player starts to understand the mechanics of the boss fight. However, Undertale is perfectly fine with players skipping the puzzle in favor of the fight. The game wants you to solve the puzzle, but it isn't going to force the issue. It's a grind, sure, but the game knows how to deal with players who are willing to put up with it. It rewards the players by giving them a different experience. It responds to the players who will grind by making it harder. This goes back into the storytelling a bit, but through moderately disincentivizing combat while also being prepared to handle the players willing to work through it. The whole system of monster encounters is woven into the other aspects of the game. So we can see that the two combat systems of the two games start with a lot of the same fundamental ingredients and mix them in different ways, resulting in two games that have very different approaches to combat. The Origami King sees combat as an inevitable part of its light RPG style, and so treats the combat in all forms as a chance to escape the slog of the world with a puzzle that players could choose to ignore. It doesn't really care what you do when the combat comes out, and you get set right back to the same world no matter what. Whether you listen to the game and solve the puzzle, or ignore it and fight, the Origami King doesn't change anything. To be sure, this is the typical RPG combat system world integration status quo. They aren't integrated. The Origami King has maybe a bit more than most. Enemies are visible in the overworld, and defeating them causes them to vanish for a while, but they'll always come back. They'll always be there. Fight, puzzle, or avoid. In the end, it makes no difference. Conversely, Undertale treats each instance of combat as a chance to test the player. Random monster encounters are there to test a player's personality. Bosses test a player's mettle. Your choice of fighting or puzzling through monsters matters. The entire game was sculpted around this exact choice. The combat isn't just an opportunity to mix up the gameplay. Each instance is a little test of character for the player. Each result has consequences besides an increase increase in currency. This, to me, is the fundamental difference in the two games. It's why the Origami King feels more hollow, despite having almost all of the same key elements as Undertale. It's inevitable that multiple games would try to modify the RPG formula in the same way. The genre is old, one of the oldest in both video games and gaming in general, so the idea of adding puzzle-solving elements to mix up combat isn't exactly far-fetched. Both of these games do this. They take that traditional turn-based RPG combat and spice it up with puzzle-solving sections. Each wants the player to solve the puzzles and incentivizes them to do so, but failing that, there's the traditional turn-based combat with a hint of real-time action to keep things more varied than they otherwise would be. The pieces are there, but the interconnectedness of Undertale's many gameplay system continues to show how designing a new RPG should be considered, while the Origami King continues to stumble in the shadows of its predecessors. And now, we come to the final chapter of this video. Both of these games were created in the image of their predecessors. Undertale was born as something akin to Earthbound fanfiction, and the Origami King is the sixth in a series. Both of these games were created to exist not in a vacuum, but to be played by players who have also played other related games. This might be the most intentional commonality between the two games. They aren't really meant to be played on their own, unlike many other games. They expect players to have some experience with their lineage, and rely on that at many different parts. I think this relationship with these games' respective histories is what got the gears turning on the idea of comparing the two in a video like this. Both of these games exist as continuations and commentaries of themselves, but they aren't equally prepared to deal with that. We'll go over this briefly, since my experience with those ancestor games is quite limited, but failing to talk about this would be missing the point. The Origami King plays off its status as not just a spiritual successor, but an actual sequel, but does it in a very clumsy way. It basically assumes that a player is familiar with the tropes of Mario games, and the specifics of a handful of Paper Mario games. However, that expected familiarity is relying on the players interacting with and feeling towards the previous games exactly as the developers intended them to. The best way to see this in action is the callback with the oscillating fan in the Great C section. It's a reference to Sticker Star, a game notorious for its mixed reception and transformation of the series as a whole. This callback was obviously included with the intention that nostalgic fans would laugh and fondly remember these past stories. But most players who will remember that fan won't remember it fondly. They'll see it as a symptom, a catalyst for the destruction of a series they love. It's expected to be well remembered, but it isn't. And as a result, the fourth wall is broken yet again for no particular reason. The commentary is there, but it isn't saying anything. Undertale doesn't have any specific games in mind for its past. It's very visually similar to Earthbound, its weirdness recalls both that game and Star Tropics, and there's plenty of other broad inspirations from around gaming and RPGs generally. But these callbacks are required in order for the game to deliver on its commentary of player choice in RPGs. Otherwise, Undertale doesn't have a lot of meaning. Perhaps this is a light critique of the game, but it's really just one of the bars of entry for a story to be effective. Not every story is as effective on every person, and Undertale is no different. It's another in the RPG story genre intended for people who already enjoy it. This is the last piece of the puzzle that goes to show why I felt so disappointed and empty with the Origami King, despite also enjoying it. Undertale broke the Origami King for me, because all of the Origami King's concepts and ideas had, unwittingly, already been better executed by Undertale. The story of the Origami King played with these complex ideas of morality, comedy in the face of tribulation, the fourth wall, and spiritual succession a little, but really stumbled and was weighed down by the details. The gameplay tried to make up for it, but was still ultimately empty and shallow. Wherever the Origami King fell, Undertale had already flourished. Undertale dealt with its story cleverly and intuitively, surrounded it with engaging gameplay, and delivered a set of stories that people still fondly remember today. So, what's the conclusion? Is the Origami King a bad game, one that should be ignored? Is it just better to play Undertale? Well, no. The Origami King has a lot to offer. It's a gorgeous game, and those visuals are something that you simply won't see in Undertale. It's also more accessible and a lot longer. It's a perfectly competent game, and I don't feel that my time playing it was wasted. That said, it really lost out, in my eyes, by having been played so soon after a game that both predated it and bested it in almost every way. The Origami King is inferior to Undertale, despite starting with many of the same foundational ideas. So the Origami King isn't a bad game, but it was eternally overshadowed, from its conception to its execution. Thank you so much for watching my video. This one was a ton of fun to make, and I think it's my best one yet. I really do hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about games I like for another 50 minutes. And hey, look, this one took even less time to make than the last one. I've been working really hard to get a better workflow and to be able to create the content that I want to make a bit faster, so that I can have the opportunity to grow this channel and entertain anyone who comes across it at the same time. Huge thanks go to everyone you see on the screen now. As always, an extra special thanks to ZSB for script editing and audio mastering. But really, this video wouldn't be possible without any of the people you see on screen now. Alright, just a bit of housekeeping. I mentioned in my video on magic, world building, and Pokemon's biggest failure that I was considering creating a follow-up video that detailed my own pitch for a Pokemon game. A lot of you guys seem to really be into that idea, so it's a project I'll definitely be tackling. I'll aim to release it this summer, but you know me and deadlines. Until then, you'll be able to enjoy at least one shorter video that I hope to have out near the end of this month. It's a video I'm really excited about, so I can't wait to share it with you. Finally, thank you again for watching my video. I'm so grateful for all the support I got on the last video, and I hope you liked this one just as much. If you like what I do and want to help me out, the best thing you could do is hit the subscribe button. I'm always working on the next project, so if you want to watch it as soon as you can, you know what to do. That's all I've got for you today. Enjoy your day and take care.